David stretched his aching back as he approached the security checkpoint at Nexus Trade Hub, one of the largest commercial stations in this sector of the galaxy. The freight run from Earth had taken 3 weeks, and all he wanted was to deliver his cargo of rare Earth minerals and get back home to his small apartment in Denver. Behind him, hover carts loaded with sealed containers followed obediently, their anti-grav units humming softly. The checkpoint bustled with activity as dozens of different species moved through the scanning gates. Tall, blue-skinned Altarians with their crystalline horns discussed trade agreements in their melodic language, while short, furry Benlights scurried between larger beings, their small hands clutching data tablets. The air recyclers worked overtime to accommodate the various atmospheric requirements, creating a slight haze that made everything look dreamlike. Security Officer Tren watched the crowd with practiced eyes, his 4 arms moving efficiently over the scanner controls. The Corthani had been working this checkpoint for over a decade, and he prided himself on never missing a potential threat. His scanner could detect everything from concealed weapons to dangerous biological agents, and it had never failed him. When David approached, Tren barely looked up. Humans were still relatively new to galactic commerce, but they had proven to be reliable traders and caused few problems. The scanner's blue light swept over David's body, analyzing his genetic structure, checking for diseases, weapons, or anything else that might pose a risk to the station. Everything seemed normal until the light reached David's right arm. The scanner froze completely, its blue light turning an angry red as alarms began blaring throughout the checkpoint. The mechanical voice of the station's AI echoed through the chamber, speaking in perfect galactic standard. Subject has survived direct contact with Apex Beast. Threat assessment impossible. Alert all security protocols immediately. The effect was instantaneous and terrifying. Every alien in the checkpoint stopped, dead in their tracks. The cheerful chatter of merchants and traders cut off as if someone had thrown a switch. Dozens of eyes, sensors, and other sensory organs turned toward David, who stood frozen in confusion as the red light continued to bathe him. A Benlight merchant dropped his data tablet, the device clattering to the floor as his small hands shook uncontrollably. 2 Altarian diplomats backed away so quickly they knocked over a cart of exotic fruits, the colorful spheres rolling across the deck plating. Even the massive Goliath loading mechs in the distance seemed to pause in their work. Tren's primary eyes widened to their maximum diameter, while his secondary pair focused on his scanner readings. In all his years of service, he had never seen the machine react this way. The threat assessment system was designed to catalog and analyze any conceivable danger, from the smallest virus to the most advanced weaponry. For it to declare a threat assessment impossible meant something had broken its fundamental understanding of danger. "What does that mean?" David asked, his voice cutting through the sudden silence. "What's an apex beast?" The question sent another wave of terror through the crowd. A group of Velturan merchants actually fled, their tentacles writhing in panic as they abandoned their goods and rushed toward the nearest exit. Security drones began emerging from hidden compartments in the walls, their sensors focusing on David. While keeping what seemed like a respectful distance, Tren forced himself to move, his training overriding his instinctive fear. He activated his emergency beacon, sending a priority alert to the station commander while trying to keep his voice steady. "Sir, please remain calm and do not make any sudden movements. Station. Security is being alerted to your presence." "My presence?" David's confusion deepened. "I'm just a freight hauler from Earth. I've got a cargo of rare minerals and all my paperwork is in order. Why is everyone looking at me like I'm about to explode?" The word explode caused another ripple of panic, and Tren quickly held up a hand for silence. He had dealt with confused travelers before, but never under circumstances like these. The scanner's red light continued to pulse ominously, casting strange shadows across David's face. "The scanner indicates you have survived direct contact with what we classify as an apex beast," Tren explained carefully, his translator working overtime to convert his clicking speech into human audible frequencies. "Such creatures are considered extinction-level threats to any planetary ecosystem. The fact that you are alive and apparently unharmed is—" He paused, searching for the right words. Unprecedented. David looked down at his right arm where faint scars crisscrossed the skin just below his rolled-up sleeve. He had gotten those scars 5 years ago during what the local authorities had called a wildlife incident in the Colorado mountains. A meteor had crashed near his hometown, and something had emerged from it that killed everything in its path for miles around. The military had eventually shown up and helped them deal with it, but not before David and several other locals had fought the creature hand to hand. "Look, I don't know what your machine is talking about," David said, rolling his sleeve down to cover the scars. "I've never heard of any apex beast. The worst thing I've ever encountered was a bear that got into my garbage last summer." This statement caused what could only be described as shocked silence among the aliens who could understand human language. The idea that someone could encounter an apex beast and casually compare it to routine wildlife was beyond their comprehension. Heavy footsteps echoed through the checkpoint as a squad of armed security guards approached, their weapons drawn, but pointed carefully away from David. Leading them was Commander Iral, the station's chief of security, whose own 4 eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Secure the checkpoint," Iral ordered, his voice carrying the authority of years in command. "Evacuate all non-essential personnel to a safe distance, and someone get Dr. Next down here immediately." The checkpoint began to empty as civilians fled and security personnel took up positions around the perimeter. David found himself standing alone in the red light of the scanner, surrounded by armed guards who seemed more afraid of him than hostile toward him. "Commander," Tren reported, his voice shaking slightly, "the human claims to have no knowledge of apex beasts. He appears genuinely confused by the scanner's reaction." Iral studied David with all 4 of his eyes, trying to reconcile the appearance of a simple freight hauler with the implications of what the scanner had detected. "That may be the most terrifying thing I've heard all day," he said quietly. "If his species encounters apex beasts and doesn't even realize what they are, then what else might they be capable of?" David raised his hands slowly, trying to show he meant no harm. "Look, I just want to deliver my cargo and go home. Whatever this machine thinks it's detecting, I assure you I'm not a threat to anyone. I'm just a regular human being trying to make an honest living." The irony of his words was lost on David, but not on the aliens surrounding him. To them, the phrase regular human being had just taken on an entirely new and terrifying meaning, as emergency lights continued to flash and security protocols engaged throughout the massive station. David began to realize that his simple freight run had just become something much more complicated. The scanner remained frozen on his arm, its red light pulsing like a heartbeat, while the mechanical voice continued to repeat its impossible declaration. He was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the galaxy is not knowing just how dangerous you really are. Dr. Nex rushed through the corridors of Nexus Trade Hub, her tentacles clutching a portable scanner and several data tablets, while her mind raced with possibilities. As the station's chief xenobiologist, she had studied thousands of different species and their interactions with the various threats that populated the galaxy. But she had never expected to encounter someone who had survived contact with an apex beast. The holding room was located in the maximum security section of the station, its walls lined with energy dampeners and isolation fields designed to contain even the most dangerous prisoners. Through the reinforced viewing window, she could see David sitting calmly at a metal table, looking more confused than concerned. While Commander Iral paced nearby, "Has he made any threatening movements?" she asked as she entered the observation chamber. "None whatsoever," replied Security Chief Holt, a burly Velteran whose normally steady demeanor showed signs of stress. "He's been completely cooperative, even offered to help us understand what the scanner detected. That might be the most unsettling part of all this." Dr. Nex activated her scanner and began taking readings through the viewing window. The device immediately began displaying data that made her tentacles writhe with excitement and terror in equal measure. "His genetic markers are off the charts," she whispered. "The scanner wasn't malfunctioning. This human really has survived direct contact with an apex beast." Inside the interrogation room, Commander Iral finally took his seat across from David, his 4 eyes studying the human, with the intensity of a predator evaluating potential prey. The silence stretched between them until David finally spoke. "So are you going to tell me what this is all about?" David asked, his voice carrying the patience of someone accustomed to dealing with bureaucracy. "I've got a schedule to keep, and my cargo bay is climate-controlled for a reason." Iral activated a holographic display in the center of the table, showing a three-dimensional representation of the galaxy, with various red zones marked throughout. "These are the locations where apex beast encounters have been recorded over the past 10,000 years, he began. "As you can see, there are very few of them." David studied the display with genuine interest. "Okay, so these apex beasts are rare. What exactly are they?" "They are creatures of such destructive capability that their mere presence on a planet is considered cause for immediate evacuation," Iral explained. "They possess adaptive biology that allows them to counter any weapon or defense system used against them. They can grow to enormous size, survive in any environment, and their cellular structure is toxic to most known life forms." The hologram shifted to show artistic representations of various apex beasts, each more terrifying than the last. Creatures with crystalline claws that could slice through starship hulls. Beings of pure energy that could drain the life from entire ecosystems. Monsters with hides that absorbed energy weapons and turned them into fuel for further growth. The galactic consensus is that if an apex beast makes planetfall, the only viable response is complete evacuation, followed by orbital bombardment. Iral continued. "Even then, success is not guaranteed. Most worlds that have encountered these creatures are declared permanently quarantined." David nodded thoughtfully as he studied the images. "They look pretty dangerous," he agreed. "But I still don't understand what this has to do with me. I've never seen anything like these things." Dr. Nex entered the room at this point, her scanner beeping softly as it continued to analyze David's biological signature. "Commander, may I?" she asked, and Iral gestured for her to proceed. "The scanner detected genetic markers that indicate you have not only encountered an apex beast, but survived direct physical contact with one," she explained. "Your immune system shows adaptations. That should be impossible. You have antibodies for toxins that don't exist in any known ecosystem." She activated her own holographic display, showing a detailed analysis of David's genetic structure. "Your DNA contains sequences that appear to be responses to extreme evolutionary pressure, the kind of pressure that would only exist on a world where encounters with apex predators were common enough to drive natural selection." David rolled up his sleeve again, revealing the network of scars on his right arm. "You mean these?" he asked. "I got them 5 years ago when something crashed near my hometown. It was some kind of alien predator that had been sleeping in a meteorite or something. Killed a bunch of wildlife and destroyed 3 towns before we managed to put it down." The room fell silent as the implications of David's casual statement sank in. "You put it down?" Dr. Nex asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Well, not just me," David clarified. "It took most of the town and some military help, but yeah, we killed it. Thing was tough, I'll give you that. Took us the better part of a week to figure out how to hurt it properly." Commander Iral leaned back in his chair, his 4 eyes blinking in rapid succession. "You're telling us that your people encountered an apex beast and instead of evacuating, you fought it?" "Didn't really have much choice," David replied. "It was killing everything in sight and moving toward the city. We couldn't just let it keep going, so we grabbed whatever weapons we could find and went after it." Dr. Nex was frantically taking notes on her data tablet, her tentacles moving so quickly they were barely visible. "What kind of weapons?" she asked. "Started with conventional stuff. Rifles, explosives, that sort of thing. When those didn't work, we got creative. Turns out the thing didn't like fire much, so we used flamethrowers and incendiary rounds. Also discovered it had a weak spot under what looked like armor plating on its neck." The xenobiologist's scanner was now emitting a constant stream of data, analyzing not just David's genetics but his vocal patterns, stress responses, and body language. Everything confirmed that he was telling the truth about his encounter. "How many casualties did your people take?" Iral asked quietly. David's expression grew somber. We lost 43 people before we figured out how to fight it effectively. It was the worst thing our town had ever faced. But we couldn't just run away and let it destroy everything we'd built. 43, Dr. Nex repeated. In galactic terms, that's considered a miraculous survival rate for an apex beast encounter. Most civilizations lose entire planets. Maybe we just got lucky, David suggested. Or maybe it wasn't as dangerous as the ones you've dealt with before. This statement caused Dr. Nex's scanner to emit a sharp warning tone. She looked at the readings and her tentacles began writhing in agitation. According to my analysis, the creature you encountered was at the high end of the apex beast classification scale. It should have been capable of wiping out all life on your continent within a matter of days. David shrugged. Well, it didn't. We stopped it. Wasn't easy. But we managed. Commander Earall stood and began pacing again, his mind struggling to process what he was hearing. Your species regularly encounters creatures that would terrify entire galactic civilizations, and you consider it a local problem to be solved with available resources? I wouldn't say regularly, David corrected. This was the first time anything like this had happened in our area, though I guess there have been similar incidents in other parts of the world over the years. Military usually handles those pretty quietly. The implications of this statement hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Dr. Nex looked up from her scanner, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. Commander, I need to recommend immediate priority communication with the Galactic Council. If this human's testimony is accurate, then we've discovered a species that not only survives apex beast encounters, but actively hunts them. David looked confused again. Hunts them? We just defended ourselves. It's not like we go looking for these things. But when they appear, you fight them instead of fleeing, Earall asked. Of course we fight them, David replied, as if the question was absurd. What else would we do? They're threatening our homes and families. You don't run away from something like that, you stand your ground and you fight. As alarms began sounding throughout the station and emergency protocols engaged, David began to realize that his simple explanation of a local wildlife incident had somehow triggered a galactic crisis. The scanner readings that had seemed so mysterious were apparently revealing something about humanity that even humans didn't fully understand. He was about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that doesn't know it's a predator at all. 3 days after the incident at Nexus Trade Hub, David found himself aboard his own freight vessel with an unexpected passenger. Dr. Nex had requested permission from the Galactic Council to accompany him back to Earth for what she called a field investigation, though the armed escort ships flanking them suggested this was more than a simple research mission. The journey through hyperspace gave them time to talk, and David learned more about galactic civilization than he had ever wanted to know. According to Dr. Nex, there were over 12,000 known species in the galaxy, and every single one of them had protocols for dealing with apex beast encounters that boiled down to a simple rule: run away as fast as possible. Your species appears to be unique, she explained as they sat in his small galley, sharing a meal of Earth coffee and Altarian nutrient bars. In our entire recorded history, there has never been a confirmed case of a primitive species successfully defeating an apex beast in direct combat. Primitive? David raised an eyebrow. We've got faster-than-light travel and energy weapons just like everyone else. Technologically, yes, you're quite advanced, Dr. Nex agreed, but your civilization is less than 100 years old in galactic terms. Most species require millennia of development before they're even considered for contact with the galactic community. Yet somehow your people have been dealing with threats that send ancient civilizations into full retreat. As they dropped out of hyperspace near Earth, Dr. Nex's instruments immediately began detecting the exotic energy signatures she had been hoping to find. Traces of apex beast biological matter were scattered throughout the planet's atmosphere, suggesting that David's encounter had not been an isolated incident. They landed at a small airfield in Colorado, where David's freight business was based. The local authorities had been notified of their arrival, though the full nature of their visit had been kept classified. Sheriff Bill Watson met them at the landing pad, his weathered face showing curiosity rather than concern. "David, good to see you made it back safely," Bill said, shaking his hand warmly before turning to Dr. Nex. "And you must be the scientist he told me about. Welcome to Earth." Dr. Nex extended a tentacle in what she hoped was an appropriate greeting gesture. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us, Sheriff Watson. I understand you were present during the incident 5 years ago." Bill's expression grew more serious. "You could say that. I was the one who coordinated the civilian response after the military boys couldn't handle it on their own. Worst thing I'd seen in 40 years of law enforcement." They drove through the mountain town in Bill's old pickup truck, past houses and businesses that showed no signs of the devastation Dr. Nex knew had occurred. The humans had not only survived their encounter with an apex beast, they had rebuilt and moved on as if it were just another natural disaster. "Tell me about the initial contact," Dr. Nex said, activating her recording device as they drove through the peaceful streets. "Started about midnight on a Tuesday," Bill began. "Big meteor came down in the national forest about 10 miles east of town. We figured it was just space junk until the Forest Service reported that everything within a mile of the crash site had died. Trees, animals, insects, even the bacteria in the soil. They stopped at a roadside memorial, a simple stone marker listing the names of those who had died in the attack. Dr. Nex's scanner immediately began detecting residual energy signatures that made her tentacles writhe with excitement. The thing came out of the crater the next morning," Bill continued. "Looked like something out of a nightmare. 30 feet tall, covered in what looked like crystal armor with claws that could cut through steel like paper. It moved toward the first town and just started destroying everything in its path." David nodded grimly. "I was making a delivery run when the evacuation order came through. But by the time I got back, half the town was already gone. The military had shown up with tanks and helicopters, but their weapons weren't doing much good." "What happened next?" Dr. Nex asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "We stopped running and started fighting," Bill said simply. "The military commander wanted to pull back and call for orbital bombardment, but we couldn't let that thing reach the city. Too many innocent people would die." They drove to the edge of the forest where the battle had taken place. Dr. Nex's instruments were now registering energy signatures that shouldn't exist on any civilized world. The ground itself had been changed at a molecular level by the creature's presence, yet somehow life had returned. "Show me how you fought it," she requested. Bill and David exchanged glances before leading her deeper into the forest. They stopped at a clearing where scorch marks still scarred the trees despite 5 years of growth. "First thing we learned was that conventional weapons just made it angry," David explained. "Bullets bounced off its hide, explosives barely scratched it, and energy weapons seemed to make it stronger. So what did you do?" Dr. Nex asked, her scanner now beeping frantically as it detected biological residue from the creature. "We got creative," Bill said with a slight smile. "Turns out the thing didn't like fire much. Something about the chemical composition seemed to interfere with its adaptive abilities. So we started using flamethrowers and incendiary rounds. But that wasn't enough," David added. "It could heal faster than we could hurt it. We needed to find a way to stop its regeneration completely." They showed her the exact spot where the creature had fallen, a circular depression in the earth where nothing would grow, even after all these years. Dr. Nex's scanner registered energy levels that would have been lethal to most known species. "How did you finally kill it?" she asked quietly. "Trial and error," David replied. "We noticed it always protected its neck area, so we figured that had to be important. Took us 3 days of fighting to create an opening, but eventually we managed to get a shaped charge against what looked like a weak point in its armor." 3 days, Dr. Nex repeated. "You fought an apex beast for 3 consecutive days. Didn't have much choice," Bill said. "It wasn't going to just go away, and we couldn't let it keep killing people. So we did what needed to be done." Dr. Nex walked to the edge of the depression and took readings that confirmed her worst fears. The creature David and his neighbors had killed was not just any apex beast. According to her analysis, it had been one of the most dangerous classifications ever recorded. How many people participated in the final battle? she asked. Pretty much the whole town, David replied. Maybe 300 people all told, plus about 50 military personnel who stayed to help instead of evacuating. 300 humans had engaged an Alpha-class apex beast in direct combat and emerged victorious. By galactic standards, it was impossible. As they drove back toward town, Dr. Nex's mind raced with the implications of what she had discovered. She had come to Earth expecting to find evidence of a miraculous survival, but instead she had found something far more significant. Sheriff Watson, she said carefully. How many similar incidents have occurred on your world? Bill thought for a moment. Well, there was that thing in the Amazon 2 years ago, and something came down in Siberia last winter. Oh, and there was that underwater incident near Japan about 6 months back, and in each case your people fought and defeated these creatures, far as I know, Bill replied. Though the government keeps pretty quiet about the details, don't want to panic the civilian population. Dr. Nex realized she was going to need a much longer report than she had originally planned. Earth was not just a world that had survived an apex beast encounter. It was a world where such encounters were treated as manageable emergencies rather than extinction events. As they returned to David's ship, she began composing an urgent message to the Galactic Council. The galaxy was about to learn that they had been sharing space with a species of natural predators who were so dangerous they didn't even realize how dangerous they were. The humans had been hunting monsters, while the rest of the galaxy ran in fear, and they had been doing it so casually that they considered it a local law enforcement matter. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within hours of Dr. Nex's preliminary report, with representatives from all major civilizations connecting via quantum communication networks. The Great Assembly Hall on Centauri Prime had never seen such an urgent gathering, with species that had been enemies for centuries setting aside their differences to address what many were calling the most significant discovery in galactic history. Chancellor Vorth of the Hegemony Alliance called the session to order, his massive form dominating the central podium. Around him, holographic representations of hundreds of species leaders flickered into existence, their various forms of communication being translated in real time by the Council's AI systems. We have received disturbing reports from Nexus Trade Hub regarding a species known as humans, Vorth announced, his voice carrying across the vast chamber. Dr. Nex, please present your findings. Dr. Nex activated her presentation system, and the chamber filled with three-dimensional displays showing her analysis of David's genetic structure, alongside historical data about apex beast encounters. Honorable representatives, I have confirmed that humans not only survive direct contact with apex beasts, but they actively hunt and kill them. A ripple of shock ran through the assembled delegates. Several representatives from the more cautious species immediately began voicing concerns about allowing such a dangerous species into galactic civilization. This is precisely why we maintain strict protocols about primitive species, declared Admiral Corvin of the Stellar Federation. They lack the wisdom to understand the threats they face, and apparently the intelligence to flee when appropriate. With respect, Admiral, they don't flee because they don't need to, Dr. Nex replied. My analysis indicates that humans evolved on a world where encounters with apex predators were common enough to drive their natural selection. They are, by definition, the ultimate survivors. She activated a new display, showing Earth's biosphere and the energy signatures she had detected. Their homeworld shows evidence of multiple apex beast encounters throughout their recent history. What we classify as extinction-level events, they classify as natural disasters to be managed and overcome. Fleet Commander Astra of the Void Guardians leaned forward in her holographic representation. Are you suggesting that Earth is some kind of apex beast spawning ground? No, Dr. Nex replied. I'm suggesting that Earth is where apex beasts go to die. The humans are natural predators who have evolved specifically to hunt creatures that the rest of us consider unstoppable. The chamber erupted into chaos as representatives began shouting over each other in dozens of different languages. Some demanded immediate quarantine of Earth and all human settlements, while others suggested studying them to learn their methods. The Chancellor was forced to use his sonic dampeners to restore order, Dr. Nex, came a calm voice from the back of the chamber. What is your assessment of the threat these humans pose to galactic civilization? The question came from elder kin of the ancient preservers, a species so old they remembered the first apex beast encounters in recorded history. Their words carried weight that silenced even the most vocal opponents. Elder kin, that is a complex question, Dr. Nex began. From a direct threat standpoint, humans appear to be remarkably peaceful. They show no aggressive expansionist tendencies, and their initial contact protocols have been exemplary. However, their capabilities are beyond anything we have previously encountered. She activated a new display showing combat analysis from David's encounter. A single human settlement of approximately 3,000 people successfully defeated an Alpha-class Apex beast using improvised tactics and primitive weapons. By comparison, our most advanced military units are trained to evacuate at the first sign of such creatures. What you're describing is impossible, stated General Thorne of the War Council. Alpha-class Apex beasts have destroyed entire star systems. No primitive species could survive direct combat with such entities. General, with respect, the evidence speaks for itself, Dr. Nex replied. I have genetic samples, environmental data, and first-hand testimony from multiple human survivors. They don't just survive these encounters, they seek them out and actively engage the threats. She played an audio recording from her interview with David. His voice filled the chamber as he casually described hunting down a creature that would have sent entire fleets into retreat. We figured it had to have some kind of weak point, David's voice explained. So we split into groups and started probing its defenses while the main force kept it distracted. Took us about 6 hours to map out its attack patterns and another 12 to figure out how to exploit them. The chamber fell, silent as the implications sank in. These humans were talking about tactical analysis and strategic planning against creatures that most species couldn't even look at without fleeing in terror. There's more, Dr. Nex continued. According to local authorities, Earth experiences approximately 12 to 15 apex beast encounters per year. They have developed standardized response protocols and specialized equipment for dealing with these creatures. Chief Scientist Morn of the Research Collective activated his communication. Hooray! Are you telling us that humans have industrial-scale apex beast hunting operations? They call it wildlife management, Dr. Nex replied. They've created specialized government agencies dedicated to containing and eliminating these threats before civilian populations become aware of them. To them, apex beasts are simply another form of dangerous wildlife that requires professional handling. The revelation that humans had bureaucratized the process of fighting extinction-level threats was perhaps the most terrifying thing the assembled delegates had heard. Elderkin spoke again, his ancient voice carrying the weight of millennia. Dr. Nex, in your professional opinion, what should be our response to this discovery? Honorable Elder, I believe we face a choice, Dr. Nex replied. We can treat humans as a threat and attempt to quarantine their expansion into galactic space, potentially creating a powerful enemy. Or we can recognize them as natural allies against the greatest threats our civilization faces. You're suggesting we form an alliance with apex predators? Admiral Corvin asked incredulously. I'm suggesting we form an alliance with the only species in the galaxy that doesn't run away from apex predators, Dr. Nex corrected. Every civilization represented in this chamber has lost worlds to apex beast encounters. The humans have never lost a single engagement. Chancellor Vorth called for order as the debate intensified. The floor recognizes Captain Reed of the human delegation. A new holographic figure appeared in the chamber. David, himself, still in his freight hauler uniform and looking somewhat overwhelmed by the formal proceedings. Dr. Nex had convinced him to participate in the session via quantum link from Earth honorable delegates. David began, his voice steady despite the circumstances. I want to assure you that humanity has no desire to threaten galactic peace. We're just trying to protect our homes and families from dangerous creatures. If our methods can help other species defend themselves, we're happy to share what we've learned. Captain Reed, Elder Kin addressed him directly. How many of these apex beasts has your species encountered? David thought for a moment. Well, the government keeps most of the statistics classified, but I'd estimate we've dealt with maybe 200 or 300 over the past century. Most of them are handled by specialized teams before they become public knowledge. The number hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. 200 or 300 successful apex beast eliminations by a single species that had only recently achieved interstellar travel, and your casualty rates? Chancellor Vorth asked quietly. Varies depending on the size and type of creature, David replied. Early encounters were pretty costly because we didn't know what we were dealing with, but we've gotten better at it over the years. Most recent operations have casualty rates under 5%. The chamber erupted again as representatives struggled to comprehend a species that had not only survived hundreds of encounters with galaxy-ending threats, but had actually improved their techniques to the point where such battles were considered routine military operations. Captain Reed, Elder Kin said when order was restored, "Would your species be willing to assist other civilizations in dealing with these threats?" "Of course," David replied without hesitation. "Nobody should have to face these things alone. If we can help prevent the loss of innocent life, we'll do whatever we can." As the session continued and the full scope of human capabilities became clear, one thing became certain to every delegate present. The galaxy had just discovered that they were no longer alone in their fight against the darkness between the stars. Humanity had been standing guard against the monsters while the rest of the galaxy slept, and they had been doing it so quietly and efficiently that no one had even noticed. The age of running from apex beasts was about to end, replaced by an age where someone finally fought back. 6 months had passed since the emergency Galactic Council session, and the reverberations were still shaking the foundations of interstellar civilization. What had started as a routine security scan at Nexus Trade Hub had evolved into a complete restructuring of how the galaxy approached its greatest existential threats. Admiral Sarah Cross stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned vessel, Terra's Shield, watching as mixed crews of humans and aliens conducted their first joint training exercises. The ship itself was a marvel of engineering, combining human tactical innovation with advanced alien technology to create something that neither species could have achieved alone. "Still seems surreal," commented Dr. Nex, who had been assigned as the ship's chief xenobiologist and cultural liaison. 6 months ago, most of these species had never heard of humanity. Now they're lining up to join the Apex Response Initiative. Sarah nodded as she watched a team of human soldiers demonstrating close-quarters combat techniques to a group of fascinated Altarian warriors. "The recruitment numbers have been beyond our wildest expectations. Apparently there are a lot of species out there who got tired of running away from their nightmares." The transformation had not been without its challenges. Many older civilizations struggled to accept that their millennia-old survival strategies were suddenly obsolete, replaced by what they saw as reckless human aggression. The Stellar Federation had initially refused to participate in the joint operations, insisting that their evacuation protocols were time-tested and reliable. That attitude had changed dramatically 3 weeks ago when an Omega-class apex beast emerged from hyperspace near the heavily populated Kepler system. The Federation fleet had begun standard evacuation procedures, expecting to lose another star system to the cosmic horror. When the human task force, Defiant, arrived on scene, Captain Marcus Webb had ignored all established protocols and taken his mixed human-alien crew directly into combat with the creature. The battle had lasted 18 hours and resulted in the complete destruction of the apex beast, with casualties limited to minor injuries among the crew. It was the first time in recorded galactic history that an Omega-class threat had been neutralized without the loss of a single civilian life. "Admiral Cross," came a voice from behind them. They turned to see Commander Errol, the Korthani officer who had first encountered David at the security checkpoint. He had since become one of the most vocal advocates for human-alien cooperation in the fight against apex threats. "Commander," Sarah acknowledged. "How are the integration exercises progressing?" "Better than expected," Errol replied, his 4 eyes showing what Sarah had learned to recognize as Korthani enthusiasm. "The Velteran shock troops have adapted remarkably well to human tactical doctrines, and the Benlight technical specialists are proving invaluable for equipment modifications. Through the observation window, They could see the mixed crews working together with an efficiency that would have been impossible just months earlier. Human engineers collaborated with Altarian technicians to modify energy weapons for anti-Apex combat, while Corthani strategists studied human battle records to develop new tactical approaches. The most interesting development has been the psychological changes, Dr. Nex observed. Species that had spent millennia living in fear of Apex encounters are experiencing something completely new: hope. Sarah understood what she meant. The galaxy's oldest civilizations had structured their entire cultures around the assumption that certain threats were simply insurmountable. The discovery that humans had been casually defeating these threats for centuries had shattered fundamental assumptions about what was possible. "We're getting reports from across the galaxy," Commander Iral added. "Worlds that had been abandoned due to Apex beast activity are being resettled. Trade routes that had been closed for centuries are reopening. The economic implications alone are staggering." A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message, and Sarah activated the ship's communication system. The holographic image of Fleet Admiral Torres appeared, her expression grim but determined. "Admiral Cross, we've received an emergency alert from the Outer Rim colonies," Torres reported. "Multiple Apex signatures detected in the Proxima sector. This appears to be the largest coordinated emergence we've ever recorded." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. They had been expecting something like this eventually. The galaxy's Apex beasts seemed to possess some form of collective intelligence, and humanity's recent successes had apparently triggered a response. "How many signatures?" she asked. 17 confirmed, possibly more," Torres replied. "The local defense forces are requesting immediate assistance. This could be our biggest test yet." Sarah looked out at the mixed crews still conducting their training exercises. Human soldiers, Altarian warriors, Corthani tacticians, Velteran specialists, and dozens of other species working together toward a common goal. 6 months ago, most of them had never met a human. Now they were preparing to face the galaxy's greatest nightmare together. "Signal all vessels in the task force," she ordered. "Set course for the Proxima sector, maximum burn, and send word to Earth Command. Tell them we may need the heavy response teams." As the Terra's shield and its escort vessels began accelerating toward hyperspace, Sarah reflected on how dramatically everything had changed. The galaxy had spent thousands of years accepting that some threats were simply too great to face, too powerful to defeat, too dangerous to even contemplate fighting. Humanity had changed, that paradigm not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through something far simpler and far more powerful: the refusal to accept that anything was impossible. "Admiral," Dr. Nex said quietly as they watched the stars shift into the familiar patterns of hyperspace. "Do you think we're ready for this?" Sarah smiled grimly. "Dr. Nex, 6 months ago I was a freight hauler from Colorado who just wanted to deliver his cargo and go home. Now I'm commanding a fleet of alien warships to fight monsters that most civilizations can't even name. If that's not proof that we're ready for anything, I don't know what is." The ship's intercom crackled to life as Commander Webb's voice echoed through the corridors. "All hands. This is the captain. We are en route to engage multiple Apex threats in the Proxima sector. For those of you who are new to this kind of operation, remember your training and trust your crewmates. For those who have been with us from the beginning, you know what we're capable of when we work together." Sarah watched through the observation ports as other vessels in the task force maintained perfect formation, their crews representing dozens of species united by a common purpose. The age of running from the darkness was ending, replaced by something the galaxy had never seen before: a coordinated response that met cosmic horror with organized determination. "Unknown contacts on long-range sensors," reported the navigation officer. "Multiple Apex signatures confirmed. Estimate arrival in 47 hours. As the fleet raced through hyperspace toward what promised to be the largest Apex beast engagement in galactic history, Sarah realized that they were about to write a new chapter in the story of civilization itself. For the first time in thousands of years, the monsters that lurked between the stars were about to discover what it felt like to be the ones who were hunted. The Battle of Proxima Sector would be remembered as the moment when galactic civilization truly understood what humanity brought to the stars. 17 apex beasts had emerged from hyperspace simultaneously, converging on the heavily populated, mining colonies with the apparent intent of causing maximum devastation. Admiral Sarah Cross stood on the bridge of Terra's shield as her mixed fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the combat zone. The tactical displays showed a nightmare scenario, creatures ranging from Alpha to Omega classification, spreading death across multiple worlds while civilian evacuation efforts struggled to keep pace with the destruction. Status report, she ordered as her crew took their stations. 7 colonial worlds under attack, reported Lieutenant Commander Kim at the tactical station. Estimated civilian population of 12 million across all affected systems. Local defense forces are maintaining holding actions, but they won't last much longer. Through the viewports, Sarah could see the evidence of the apex assault. Entire continents burning on distant worlds while massive creatures moved like living storms across the surface. It was exactly the kind of scenario that had driven entire civilizations to abandon star systems in the past. Admiral called Dr. Nex from her science station. I'm detecting coordination patterns in their attack vectors. These creatures aren't acting independently. Something is directing their assault, Sarah nodded grimly. They had suspected this might happen eventually. The apex beasts were responding to humanity's success with tactics of their own, escalating from individual threats to coordinated swarm attacks. Signal the fleet, she commanded. All units, initiate formation. Omega. Target priorities are civilian protection and creature isolation. Remember your training and trust your wingmates. The human-alien fleet spread out across the combat zone with precision that would have been impossible without months of joint training. Human tactical doctrine emphasizing rapid response and concentrated firepower, combined with alien technological advantages to create something entirely new in galactic warfare. Captain Marcus Webb took his assault group directly toward the largest concentration of apex creatures, while Commander Iral led a mixed squadron of Corthani and Altarian vessels in a flanking maneuver. The coordination between species that had been strangers 6 months earlier was seamless. First contact in 30 seconds, reported the communications officer. All squadrons report ready. Sarah watched as the tactical display updated with incoming fire from the apex creatures, energy beams that could vaporize starship hulls, bioprojectiles that adapted to counter-defensive systems, and reality-distorting attacks that had driven civilizations to madness. All units, this is Admiral Cross, she announced over the fleet communication system. Today we show the galaxy what happens when we stop running. Engage at will. The battle erupted across 7 star systems simultaneously as humanity's new alliance met the greatest apex threat in recorded history. What followed was 18 hours of combat that redefined what galactic civilization thought was possible. Instead of the evacuation and retreat that had characterized every previous apex encounter, the mixed fleet engaged the creatures directly. Human fighters darted between massive alien limbs while Altarian heavy cruisers provided covering fire. Corthani tactical specialists coordinated strikes against weak points identified by human pattern analysis, while Velturan technical teams maintained equipment under impossible conditions. Target Omega-7 is adapting to our energy weapons, reported Captain Webb over the communication network. Switching to kinetic bombardment protocols, confirmed Omega-7, responded Commander Iral. My squadron will provide distraction while you reposition. The conversation was taking place while both officers maneuvered their vessels around a creature the size of a small moon that was trying to devour their ships. 6 months earlier, such coordination would have been unthinkable. Now it was. Routine tactical procedure. Dr. Nex monitored the biological readings from her science station, tracking the creature's adaptive responses and relay information to the combat units in real time. Alpha 3 is showing vulnerability to thermal attack in the dorsal region, she announced. Recommend concentrated flame units on that position. Copy. That Dr. Nex, came the response from a Benlight squadron leader whose people had never engaged in direct combat, until humanity showed them it was possible. As the hours passed, something unprecedented began to happen. The apex creatures, for the first time in galactic history, began to retreat. Faced with coordinated resistance that adapted as quickly as they did, the monsters that had terrorized civilizations for millennia found themselves outmatched. Omega-class target is withdrawing toward hyperspace, reported the sensor technician. Multiple alpha targets following the same vector. Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction as she watched the tactical display. 4 of the 17 creatures had been completely destroyed, while the remaining 13 were fleeing the system entirely. More importantly, civilian casualties had been limited to fewer than 1,000, a fraction of what would have been lost in a traditional evacuation scenario. All units, this is Admiral Cross, she announced. Outstanding work. Everyone, begin search and rescue operations for any remaining survivors. Medical teams to all affected worlds immediately. As the fleet began the delicate work of disaster relief, Sarah reflected on what they had just accomplished. They had not just defeated the largest apex incursion in recorded history. They had done it without losing a single world or abandoning a single civilian population. Admiral. Dr. Nex approached her command station with a data tablet full of readings. The implications of what just happened are going to reshape galactic politics. We didn't just win a battle. We proved that the fundamental assumptions about apex threats were wrong. Sarah nodded as she watched rescue ships moving toward the affected worlds. How long before word of this spreads? It's already spreading, Dr. Nex replied. Every major civilization had long-range sensors trained on this sector. By now, the entire galaxy knows that 17 apex beasts attacked a populated system and were driven off with minimal casualties. The communication system activated with an incoming message from Earth Command. Fleet Admiral Torres appeared on the holographic display, her expression mixing pride with concern. Admiral Cross, congratulations on a successful operation, Torres began. However, we're receiving communication requests from over 200 different civilizations. It seems everyone wants to know more about joining the Apex Response Initiative. Sarah wasn't surprised. Fear had been the galaxy's primary response to existential threats for millennia. Now that humanity had proven those threats could be defeated, every civilization wanted access to the methods and technology that made victory possible. There's more, Torres continued. The Galactic Council has voted to establish a permanent Apex Defense Command, with Earth designated as the primary command and training center. They're requesting human leadership for what they're calling the most important military organization in galactic history. As the implications sank in, Sarah realized that David's simple freight run had become something far more significant than anyone could have imagined. Humanity's casual approach to fighting monsters had evolved into a galactic defense network that would protect countless civilizations for generations to come. Admiral, called the communications officer. Incoming. Message from the Proxima colonies. They're requesting permission to establish a permanent human alien base in their system. Similar requests were pouring in from across the galaxy. Worlds that had lived in fear of Apex encounters for centuries were now volunteering to host the forces that could protect them. 6 months earlier, humanity had been unknown to galactic civilization. Now they were being asked to lead it in the fight against its greatest threats. The species that had learned to hunt monsters in the mountains of Colorado was about to become the galaxy's shield against the darkness between the stars. Dr. Nex, Sarah said as she watched the rescue operations continue. I want you to prepare a comprehensive report on everything we've learned. If we're going to be teaching the galaxy how to fight these things, we need to make sure we do it right. Already. In progress, Dr. Nex replied. Though I think the most important lesson is the simplest one. Sometimes the best way to deal with a monster is to stop treating it like it's invincible and start treating it like it's just another problem to be solved. As the Terra's shield began its journey back toward Earth, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since that day at Nexus Trade Hub, when a simple security scanner had frozen on David's arm. Humanity had discovered its place in the galaxy, not as explorers or diplomats, but as the civilization that stood between the light and the shadows, The age of running from apex beasts was over, replaced by an age where someone finally stood and fought. And for the first time in galactic history, the monsters that lurked in the darkness had learned what it meant to be afraid.